and welcome to the Women in STEM event hosted by MorTorq Robotics. Thank you for joining us.
Today, we will get to hear from 4 successful women in STEM careers. We will discuss their journeys to their accomplishments and how they work to promote young women in STEM.
Thank you each for joining us.
To start, please introduce yourself to our audience, telling us a bit about who you are and where you work. Let's start off with Ms. Rawlins, Ms. Koller, Ms. Gabriel, and Dr. Danesh.
So I'm Samantha Rawlins. I was a student at Beverly High in 2009 to 2010. And then where I'm currently at now, and then since then I've gone off to college, graduate school for my master's degrees, and I'm now doing my PhD part-time as well as working part-time for a contracting company to NASA called Analytical Mechanics Associates. The work that I do, that I focused on and gone throughout my career, is specifically dedicated to something called nuclear thermal propulsion, which is an advanced propulsion technology for getting humans to Mars in half the time, much faster, safer, much more exciting way than what we currently have capable. So that technology is called nuclear thermal propulsion.
Hi, I'm Scarlett Koller. I also work in the space industry, but in a slightly different area. I'm not quite as well educated as Samantha, but I only have a bachelor's degree, but I work at NASA JPL, and I do systems testbed engineering for the Mars 2020 Perseverance rover. I do a lot of testing of the landing sequence, and hoping that'll all go well. It's landing in February.
Hi, I'm Annika Gabriel. I'm originally from Corvallis, Oregon. I got my bachelor's degree in engineering physics from Case Western Reserve University. And I'm currently a physics PhD student at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And I'm doing my PhD thesis research at SLAC National Lab, which is behind me. Yeah. Oh, and I guess my thesis research is focusing on terahertz electron acceleration.
Thank you for having us. I'm Gina Danesh. I am a physician. I grew up mostly in Santa Monica and West LA. I went to UCLA after high school, and then I went to Western University, which is an osteopathic medical school. And then I did family practice, and then I joined my practice with my husband, who's a dermatologist, and now we have Danesh Dermatology in 2 offices, one in Beverly Hills, one's near Pasadena, and we have lots of fun. So
We will begin by asking questions each person will answer, then we'll go into more specified individual questions. To start off, who or what inspired you to be in the field you work in?
It's less of a necessarily specific moment. My driving purpose for as long as I can remember was just getting humans to Mars. That's the thing that gets me out of the bed every morning. And so it was during specifically for nuclear space propulsion, it was during my very first internship at NASA back in 2012 that another intern kind of pointed down the hall and towards where the nuclear space propulsion research was taking place. And he said that was the technology that was actually going to make this happen. And, I started pointing my career in that direction, and he was absolutely right. It's the future.
So for me, it's not dissimilar. I've always been fascinated by space. I think it's a very human thing to look up at the sky and wonder what's out there. But I've always been fascinated by how we know what we know about space and how we find out things like, oh, Mars has water on it. And being able to figure out all of the little kinks in all of the problems that we encounter in what seem like simple things has always been fascinating to me. So I found that aerospace was the best field for me.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough in high school to get to see a talk by Carolyn Porco, who's led the imaging science team on the Cassini mission in orbit around Saturn. And I was just like so fascinated and blown away by her work. As a high schooler, And then in high school, I had a really excellent physics teacher. And then in college, I also had a series of very excellent physics teachers that were able to guide me and support my interests.
So I've always wanted to be a doctor ever since I was a little kid. We have a lot of physicians in the family, and so it was just pretty much inborn, basically. And that's, it was something from childhood that I strived for. And every day it was just, okay, this is what I want to do. And luckily it was a good choice. I'm very happy.
Thank you all for your responses. What additional support would you have liked to have during your education and the beginning of your career?
So this one kind of, when you sent the question in advance and I started thinking about it, it kind of sent me off into a bit of a spiral. But the best way I can summarize it was, while I was going through undergrad, even maybe a little bit of high school, but primarily through undergrad and especially in the start of my career, I could come up with really 4 key aspects that are kind of the pinnacle of what I believe everyone needs for having a really strong support network. The first is kind of basic, it's money. There's a certain amount where if you get any lower than that, that's all that's on your mind, and like try and get it so you can actually think about anything else. I'm sure that Annika, as a grad student, understands the stresses of that. The second is a role model. I was really lucky to have a female role model who'd kind of walked in similar steps the whole time. The third is therapy. We've all got something to work through, hands down. And the better you have your inner mind clear, you just present yourself that 10 times, 100 times better externally at job, work, everything. I was really lucky I had all 3 of those things. The fourth one is the one that I really wish I could have had and fostered better, which is friends. It's having a real friend. What does having a real friend actually mean? The way that I define it, it's no matter how hard you try to avoid it, as long as you're trying to do something, even if you're not necessarily trying, you're going to have lows in life. You're going to be sad one day. Things are going to be hard. A real friend is someone where even when you're literally just sitting, dark room, holed up in the corner of your bedroom, feeling like the world is crumbling down, at least you don't feel alone, because you know that there's someone you can reach out to and just bare your whole soul to. Someone who isn't going to change you, isn't going to judge you, someone who isn't going to try and tell you anything, give you advice. They'll just sit there, be with you. Those kinds of friends are really, really what could have made a huge difference in getting me through education and early career. I made the mistake of trying to find that role in a significant other. I tried to find a boyfriend who could fill that role for me, and that is wrong. Those are 2 different roles, and if you try and stuff one person to do both roles, it's not going to work. So really having a platonic, real friendship with someone can really, really make the difference between getting through.
So, totally agree with you, Samantha. It's really important to have friends. When I was thinking about this, I was a little bit more focused on what kind of professional support I would have liked. And I started my career at SpaceX, as Ella pointed out earlier, and I think that at that time I didn't recognize when and how I needed to ask for help when I was struggling. And I also, it was somewhat exacerbated by a working culture where it was a little bit more difficult to ask for help and to set out boundaries. And I would have really appreciated some, perhaps therapy. Definitely, Samantha's right. So therapy is very valuable to most people, but I would have appreciated a mentorship structure. There was supposed to be one, but I don't. But it didn't really work out, and apparently no one could mentor me at that time. And I think that I struggled with that. I struggled with figuring out who to ask for help. And I think some sort of mentorship structure and some sort of advancement advice system would have been very useful to me and to some other people who are new and starting their careers, because if you it, it's really easy to get very wrapped up in the weeds of what it is that you're doing. But I think it's important to both know that you should and can reach out to someone who's a little bit more advanced in their career, and that someone is prepared to give you advice on how do you get to where you want to go next, and how to think about where you might want to go next, and how to be able to set effective boundaries for yourself in your work and in your life. And this sort of feeds into something else that is on the list of questions later on. But I think it's important to seek out people, preferably people that you don't work for early on, and get some suggestions as to how you should try and move your career forward without completely destroying your entire life. And I didn't recognize always that I needed to ask someone for that, and I also didn't get a lot of support in doing that sort of thing. So I think it's important to think about what kind of work environment you want to be in, and it's important to seek help and advice even if you don't know what you need it for. And I wish I'd had some sort of system where someone had said, yeah, it's okay to ask for help and ask questions.
I just want to totally agree with the importance of like having a space to ask for help. I think that's really essential. For me specifically, I've been very lucky that in general I've had a really excellent support system and a series of like really great mentors that have like gone out of their way to help me achieve what I want to achieve. But one thing I could think of is that I really wish I had learned about imposter syndrome a lot sooner. So for those of you that maybe don't know what it is, the like general definition is a pattern in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments, and has a persistent internalized fear of being like exposed as not knowing what's going on. And the thing is, it's extremely common for women and minorities in science, and really just everyone, to experience this. And I didn't know that, and I didn't learn about it until UCSC, my PhD institution, has a really excellent TA training program. And so when I was training to be a TA, they taught us all about imposter syndrome and how to help our students deal with that. And I learned about it for the first time, and I was like, oh, this is, something that's probably been affecting me. And once you know about it, it's much easier to like recognize those thoughts and then control them and be like, oh, no, that's imposter syndrome saying that like I didn't really do well on this test, right? So I wish I'd learned about that a lot sooner, but that's it.
That's incredible that UCSC offers that kind of a program. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, it is. It's a really cool thing. Yeah.
Oh, I'd like to back up Samantha on therapy, because Annika, you are totally right. And I knew about imposter syndrome fairly early on in my education, and I still struggle with it. So I'm glad that you said that, and I would definitely recommend talking about this with a neutral party if you can.
I agree with all three of you. You guys are awesome. So for medical school, there's a lot of prereqs, and a lot of questions come up. And so I wish that there was more support at UCLA. Like UC is where I went to. And it was very difficult to find a mentor. So you had to personally go and search and look for someone. And then when I found the field of osteopathic medicine, then there was almost none. And they're mostly in the East Coast, and there was only one school on the West Coast. So then I had to be very forward and I had to go myself and search and look and knock on doors, basically. And I wish there was someone who, like, there was somewhere where you could go and say, okay, so what are all the different fields? I looked into optometry, I looked into pharmacy, but they're all so sporadic. I wish it was like somewhere where you could go to and they could just help you and then tell you like which mentors are available. So right now we mentor a lot of kids and students, and I have a lot of kids who call and say, can I come watch you? And I'm thinking of osteopathic medicine. Can I talk to you? So I'm very open into having students come now because of what I didn't have. Luckily, eventually, in like the end of third year, I found someone and he was amazing. So I was able to go and really see if this is something that I really wanted to do. That is one point. And then once you get into medical school, then there's a whole different story. Then you really need your friends. And hopefully no one will understand unless they've been through it, just like you guys said. So hopefully in your class, you will have someone who you can connect with and be able to go through these few years together. And luckily I had someone. We actually lived in the same complex. And so we went, we came, we cried, we went to the gym together to work out. So you got to find out also how to release all that stress that you have, because it's tough. Any STEM field is tough, especially for women. We have tens of other things that we have to think about. So having a support system is very, very important. Luckily, my family support was good and they really backed me up. But having that friend really, really was important.
Thank you. I think imposter syndrome is something incredibly important to talk about. So I'm glad that came up. So what is the most rewarding aspect of your jobs or career?
The most rewarding part of my job right now is actually not in the day-to-day. It's moments, it's more in the big picture. On the small scale, what I'm doing isn't flashy. I have meetings, I try to learn how to work and communicate with my supervisor, colleagues, just to get my point across, and I just do the super detailed grunt work. I'm still new in my career. What makes my job rewarding, though, is when I'm able to take a step back and I can see the big picture of how far we have as a team have come, how much closer we are to getting humans to Mars, and the fact that we've accomplished quite a bit. If things don't work out and my team doesn't, our project doesn't end up getting us to Mars, I'll still feel really proud of what I did do, because I know that I did my best every day. I tried, I came with the willingness to try my best. So in summary, I guess the most rewarding part about my job right now is that it's an environment that does let me try my best every day so that I can be proud.
So for me, I think the most rewarding part of my job, I've worked on, I mentioned the Mars 2020 Perseverance mission, and a lot of people watch that, and I've worked on the SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule, which so far, no one who's flown in it has died, so that's great. But I'm mentioning things that even if you're not in my field, a lot of people might have heard of. And it's incredibly rewarding to me that there are literally millions of people out there who are finding some sort of inspiration in something that I worked on. And I have been a very small part of a very large machine of thousands of people working very hard on all of these projects. But in some way, I contributed to that, and there are a lot of people out there who have watched this, and I know this to be the case because this has happened for all sorts of previous similar missions. People are watching that and they are excited about what science and technology can do, and they're inspired to help further that in whatever way they want to. There's a 13-year-old boy who named the Perseverance rover who's much more excited now about pursuing a career in engineering. And something similar happened to the girl who named the Curiosity rover. And they might not go into aerospace engineering, but they've been shown so many possibilities about what they can do, and I find it really motivating that people are getting more excited about STEM fields and about the possibilities of what they could do because of something that I did, and that's really what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, I would just say more simply, because I'm really only in my second year of my PhD program, but I get to learn new things constantly and every day. And every group meeting I go to, there's something new or some new technique that someone's trying, and then I get to go and learn about that. And I really love to learn things, and I really love to learn new things and be exposed to new ideas. So that's my favorite part.
So the most rewarding part for my job is that I'm able to teach. So I see lots of patients, so I'm able to teach them about multiple different factors. So that's the most rewarding part, to be able to teach and help them in that aspect. Not just help them by, fixing their ailments, but also teach them about how to be healthy and, in multiple different aspects, So that's the most rewarding part.
Thank you all. What accomplishment are you most proud of?
I guess I could joke and say right now it's the fact that I cooked my own Thanksgiving meal last weekend. It took me 2 days. I had a bit of a mental breakdown in between, but I got it done. And oh boy, that was huge. No, but on a more serious note, or professional note, I should say, Thanksgiving is serious. But professionally, the thing I'm most proud of, the accomplishment that I've achieved, is the fact that, except for my very first internship, the one that kind of got me started at NASA, my first NASA internship, I haven't actually had to seriously apply for a job. Jobs have just come to me. And that happened because I dedicated all of my time to really developing and honing my networking skills. There's a lot of resources out there to make that happen and to help people learn and grow, but jobs have come to me, and not just any old job, it's the job that I want. I said, no, this is what I want to do. And people have come to me and said, sure, we'll make that job happen. We'll make that job exist if that's what you want to do. So I'm really proud that I got to that point.
That's super impressive. I just wanted to say that. I have had to apply for jobs, pressures of not being an academic. But one of the things I'm proudest of is some of the test work that I've done for the Mars 2020 program. And so for context, I mentioned I'm a systems testbed engineer. The testbed is sort of the stunt double, if you will, of the spacecraft. And we have operations tests, and they're not tests of the rover. They're actually tests of the operations team that's going to be actually operating the rover. So we've had tests for launch and now for landing. And in my job as a testbed engineer, I have had to be what's called a gremlin. And so for these tests, what we do is we operate the testbed as if it were the real spacecraft, and we feed all of the data and the telemetry into the mission control room. And then all of the operations engineers, they interact with it as if they were doing the real landing sequence. And as a gremlin, what I've gotten to do, and this takes months of work, is devise ways of injecting anomalies that look like they could be plausible things that would happen in flight, and devise ways of devise anomalies that, first of all, can be injected in the test bed, because there are some limitations based on the fact that it's not real and it's not in space. And then come up with things that will challenge the operations team and make them interact in their different subsystems and different, what we call, domains. It's a real test of trying to make the operations team think. And this is a sort of human but also very technical problem. And so I've really enjoyed that, and I have been able to come up with some really interesting ways of, for instance, at one point we actually turned off the sun, and I managed to figure out a way of breaking the solar simulation in the test bed so that it would look like a certain device had failed because of a certain thing, which would require a few different teams to work together. And I think being able to interact with different teams and understand people with different backgrounds and disciplines within engineering and orchestrate a cohesive response is probably one of the most important things in engineering. Being able to work with people is just as important as technical interactions. And I'm really proud that I've been able to come up with ways of making people do that. And the people in question are people who've been in this field for 20 years and really, really know what they're talking about. And I'm very proud that all of these tests that I've worked on have gone so well, and that I was able to come up with something that would really put them through their paces. So that's one of the proudest things. And if you ever happen to watch a launch or a landing and you see all the people excited in mission control, bear in mind they've done that 3 or 4 times beforehand, and sometimes they've done it cursing the name of the test bed because we have come up with weird things that they had to deal with. But they're all excited that it worked, but it took a lot of practice to get there. So that's something I'm very proud of.
Yeah, so once again, I'm only a second-year grad student, so I think at this point in my career, I would say the accomplishment I'm most proud of is just getting into grad school. It's not easy. The applications are hard, and it represented, really working my whole life. So, yeah, when I get a paper out, I'll be proud of that, but I'm not there yet.
So the most right now at this point, the proudest I am is that we've become a teaching facility. So we have a lot of students that rotate through our office, and we can teach them the way that we practice. And again, as someone said, I think it was Scarlett, that it's the human interaction and not necessarily the professional aspect of any field, that it's the bedside manner, the humanity aspect. And I'm really proud that we're able to teach that to our students. And I think that really will take them far, because they can learn the medicine. That's not difficult in the long run. They'll eventually get it. But having them watch someone interact with patients is extremely important. So I'm very proud that we're able to do that. That's on a professional side. On a personal side, I'm very proud of my kids. Because of the love of medicine that both my husband and I have, they're all pursuing STEM careers. So hopefully, one is already toward medicine, the other ones are also interested in multiple different aspects of STEM. So on a personal level, I can bring that up to you. So if you're happy, you guys, with what you're doing, then you can exude that into not just your kids, but your friends and cousins and everyone else. So I see all 3 of you are so happy and so excited about your careers, and that will go far for yourselves as well as for the whole community in general. So I'm proud of all you guys.
Thank you. What advice would you give to young students, or girls in particular, wanting to pursue a career in STEM?
I had 2 things. Hopefully it doesn't take up too much time, but the first one is much more just practical. it's, and to everyone, do not ignore your grades the first 2 years of college. Freshman and sophomore year, you think it's partying, it's fun. That's where you find friends, make up. Sure, all of that is true, but freshman and sophomore year is when your classes will be the easiest they will ever be. And it is also when having a really strong GPA is usually the key difference between those, at least from my experience and in my class, who graduated with the top job they wanted, they were super excited about, versus just any job, the first job they could find if they got a job at all. My first couple of years, I finished up with a 3.92 GPA, and then I really struggled the rest of undergrad, such that, B's, C's, really, I think my second half GPA was barely a 3.0, if that. But because of the way that the GPA system works out, I ended up with a 3.6. Some of my classmates who were just as smart, arguably some of them smarter than I were, played around, had fun freshman and sophomore year, maybe finished up barely a 3.0 GPA, then got almost straight A's the rest of school. They finished with a 3.2, 3.4. I got more jobs than they did because I had the highest, even the slightly higher GPA. We're both capable, we're both great. It really matters those first 2 years. They make a huge difference. And then the second one is more, personal. And because this is my personal experience and how it worked out for me, what I would recommend is really thinking and digesting, what do you want to do? What makes you happy, and how can you incorporate that into a STEM career? Then look for the job. Don't seek out jobs, look for anything you can get and try and find one that kind of matches and you're like, oh, that's good enough. Find what you like and what you want to do, and then look for the job that exists, look for the job that does that. If it doesn't exist, make it. And that's not impossible. And there's people, aerospace engineering, you think, oh, okay, well, aerospace, space, plates, that's not it. There's aerospace engineers. There was a girl in my school, my grade, who specifically joined aerospace engineering because she wanted to work on race cars. That's aerospace engineering. There's aerospace engineers who care more about helping humanity. And so UNICEF, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. For me, that meant like the little boxes with coins for Halloween. They're a humanitarian service because they have people that they deploy all around the world to remote areas to help them. That means that UNICEF, the organization, has an entire satellite constellation that exists just for them so that they can communicate while they're in their remote areas. UNICEF hires aerospace engineers. If you are interested in art and knitting or anything random, if you have a random hobby, underwater basket weaving, fashion, there is an engineering job or a STEM job that you can fit and make both of those work. So look for what you like to do and how there's a potential way to do engineering, and then create that job for you. It might already exist, awesome. If not, you can make it.
So that was really great advice, Samantha. Thanks. Mine might sound conflicting, but I swear it is still in the same realm. My advice would be to be flexible with your career goals. Now, I don't mean to say that you should settle for a job that's like, yeah, I'm kind of interested in it. But what I mean is that I have found myself interested in a lot of different things in the course of my career because, surprise, surprise, I work in a really interesting field and meet a lot of very cool people. And when I was in undergrad, I was really, really into space propulsion. And actually, I'm probably going to see if I can contact Samantha and talk to her about her research because it sounds so cool. But so I mentioned previously that I have really found that the human interactions are an incredibly important part of engineering. And I've now sort of branched out into what you might call systems engineering, which does require a lot of higher level strategic thinking, and it does rely on a lot more human relationships. And, you know, I didn't necessarily ever think I would do this, but I've actually applied to a program now to pursue a master's and an MBA at the same time, because I think that this sort of higher level, very human structure is really what makes these projects move forward. So I've sort of changed my path from where I thought it would go in undergrad, and I think it's really important that you try to not get yourself locked into one particular thing that you think you want to do. It is inevitable that you're going to change your mind about what you might be interested in. And I would really encourage you to be flexible with where you want to go. And if you find something that you want to pursue, don't don't fight it because you feel you have pigeonholed yourself into one particular route. That's been a very important thing for me. It's been very important for me to be flexible with where do I want to go from here. And there are a lot of opportunities that you might miss that you might be really excited about if you feel like you have to be focused on one thing. Again, this doesn't mean take a job that you're not interested in. I'm totally with Samantha on that. But if there's something that interests you, just because it's not in this very rigidly defined idea of what you're going to do, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be open to it.
No, I totally agree with you, Scarlett. Yeah, and thank you for saying that, because you're very true. I do not want anyone to take away from what I said. Like, pick one thing and that's the next 40 years of your life. I don't have a 5-year plan. It's all just the next step, and that changes. You're so true.
Well, I think for me personally, thinking back to my high school self, I was convinced most of high school and a large part of undergrad that like one failed homework assignment was going to be like the end of my entire career, or like a failed test was like that was it, and that's just really, really not true. Like I've failed loads of homework assignments, lots of quizzes, plenty of tests, you know, and here I am in a physics PhD program. I took the AP physics test in high school, really didn't do well on that. And here I am in a physics PhD program. So like definitely always try your hardest, always put your best effort forward. But if you do fail something, like that's not the end. You can always come back. And it's really, in my experience, more a game of how determined you are than how successful you are immediately. I would say that.
So my advice is to make sure this is the career that you want, and not because someone said that this is good, or, oh, I think this will be good. And once you get too far, I've seen people just drop out of med school. So they've gotten in and then this is just not what they wanted. So make sure it is something that you really want to do in any field that you go to. Do more research, go hang out with the people, do internships, and then you really know approximately where you want to go. Because if you don't like what you're doing, it's not going to be good. So definitely pick a field that will interest you, as everyone else said. And then within that field, you can do so many different things. Even in medicine, there's so many different ways to go. It's not just being a doctor. There's so many different fields in even research, and multiple other ways that you can help people. If you say, oh, I just want to help people, well, you don't just have to be a doctor face to face. You can do so many different other aspects. So just know what you want to do and go and look, spend time. That's my advice.
Thank you all so much for your responses. Now we're going to be doing some individual questions. Ms. Rawlins, starting with you, can you tell us more about your work at Analytical Mechanics Associates? And follow up, what advice do you have for students wanting to gain work experience while still attending school?
Sure. So specifically about Analytical Mechanics Associates, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I'm also technically kind of what's considered a systems engineer. I have degrees in both aerospace engineering and nuclear engineering. And so right now what I'm doing a lot is being that kind of voice between the two fields. Some of them literally both fields will sometimes use the exact same word and have different meanings, and they'll be talking at each other, and I'm the only one going, you realize you're not, like, these are the same words, but they don't, it's, what is the Princess Bride? Like, you keep using that word, I do not think it means what you think it means, right? Like, that's kind of a role that I play, one of the roles I play at AMA, which is a really exciting role. When you say advice for students wanting to gain experience with work and school, if you mean that in the context of at the same time, because that's what I'm doing right now, I'm doing part-time work and part-time research for my PhD. If that's what you're talking about, my recommendation is please don't do it. It sounds hypocritical because that is what I'm doing, but it's, from my honest assessment, I'm kind of doing both not nearly as well as I wish I could have because I'm splitting my time. And PhD is also something that's kind of different than undergrad, high school, the other areas. Those ones are much more intensive. PhD is very fluid. You know, there's a couple of classes you have to take, but then the rest of it is kind of on your own, and you and your advisor. I did try to do a co-op. I did try to do both school and an internship while I was an undergrad, and it didn't work. They had only asked me to come in every other Friday. And even with that, 2 months into it, I just couldn't balance the workload of school, of undergrad and that internship. And I had to end that internship early. It's really, really hard. If you are looking for a job for the money, especially in school, what I would recommend is really look for any and all scholarships you can find. I was very fortunate in that I had my parents to lean back on if I needed to, but regardless of them, I was able to get almost over $25,000 in scholarships. And that wasn't everything for school. I have opinions about education and the cost of education, but that wasn't everything, but it really made a difference. Please be able to try and focus on school, but then do get internships. Internships are really important. Focus, but keep them separate. Do school during the school year, internship during the summer. That will really help you make sure you do the best of both.
Ms. Koller, you currently work at NASA and previously worked at SpaceX. What is the difference between working for a government agency and a private corporation, especially regarding gender equality?
So I think it's a little bit difficult to say what the differences are regarding gender equality, specifically regarding SpaceX versus JPL, because they are pretty distinct. And I think things do differ between SpaceX and other private organizations, and things are different between JPL and other government labs. However, I've also had an internship at Northrop Grumman, and I think that at both Northrop Grumman and at SpaceX, I would say perhaps there was a little bit less directed professional development that was aimed at women. But both companies are actually working hard to recruit more women right at this particular moment. I do know that for a fact. A friend of mine is still at Northrop, and I've been hearing a lot about their efforts. So that might change. JPL in particular has a very long history of having women in key technical roles. I don't know if any of you have read the book Rise of the Rocket Girls, but JPL recruited a whole bunch of women who were the first computers back when computer meant a person computing. And they became the first computer engineers when JPL actually acquired a computer. And I think in part because of that, JPL in particular has been a place that very heavily focuses on women's professional development in STEM fields. So I think in that sense, I think it's been more helpful for me because I've been able to access structures that are in place for women to seek mentorship and take courses for professional advancement. And there wasn't quite that formal structure in place at SpaceX, and not quite as much at Northrop, although I believe they are working on building that up. I would say that in government enterprises, you might end up seeing more women in technical roles because, so technically I work for Caltech. I'm a contractor to the federal government, but I don't directly work for them. But because of the nature of government labs, government-sponsored labs and government jobs, you might see more women in technical roles because they provide they typically provide more flexibility. And so you see more older women with families in technical roles, I've noticed. That said, things are changing very quickly. By the time high school students like yourself are entering this workforce, I think you might not find that to be the case anymore, because, as mentioned, there are a lot of efforts ongoing in the private industries to really recruit more women and make their workplaces more accessible to women, because they're starting to recognize that they're neglecting a huge pool of talent. So it's difficult for me to say that, to say what that field might look like. But I would say that government-sponsored labs are a little bit more flexible, and they have a longer history of being a little bit more flexible. And I'm sorry, could you remind me of the other question you had?
I think that was it.
Oh, that was it? Okay, go on.
Thank you. Ms. Gabriel, since graduating from high school, what internships or research opportunities have you pursued, and how have these steps contributed to the position you currently hold?
Yeah, so sort of to agree with Samantha's point about like networking and talking to people. When I first learned about networking, I was like, but it's really been just important to my career. So in undergrad, I found a professor who was doing physics research that I was really interested in. And I quite honestly just showed up to his office and said, hello, I'm very interested in what you're doing. Can I get involved? And I was lucky enough that he said yes. And then it was actually really, really helpful for me. I was involved in an internship in his lab for several years of undergrad and did that while doing classes. And for me, that was like an extremely positive experience, and really helped me learn what I was interested in and what I wanted to pursue. And then, let's see, my senior year of college, I got really interested in accelerator physics. And I actually used the same strategy. I went to my advisor and I said, I'm really interested in this research field. How can I get involved? And I was lucky enough that he had friends at Fermilab. And so he reached out to his friends, and I emailed people, and I actually went and visited, and I was able to find someone who was willing to work with me. And I was able to do my senior thesis research with an accelerator physicist at Fermilab because of that. And then in graduate school now, when I met my advisor, UCSC assigns everyone like an initial advisor. I talked to him and I said, I'm really interested in accelerator physics. What are the options? And he said, well, let's talk to the people at SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory. And it's a really funny chain of events, actually, because he connected me to a student who was involved at SLAC, who connected me to a friend who gave me a ride, who introduced me to someone, who introduced me to someone, who introduced me to Emilio, who is Emilio Nani, who is now my PhD thesis advisor. So I really just want to, it's not always going to work out. Sometimes you talk to people and they say like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have any opportunities right now. But a lot of times, even if they say that, they'll say, I don't have any opportunities, but let me connect you to this other person. And people really love to talk about their research and their work. So a lot of times just showing up and saying, hey, I'm really interested in what you're doing. Can I learn more? Has been a really, really effective way for me to find opportunities. So I would definitely recommend that.
Thank you. Dr. Danesh, as someone who owns a practice and must manage employees, what traits do you think make an effective leader?
So that's tough. The most important thing is to be patient. Patience is a virtue in reality. So if you're not patient, people will quit on you quickly. You know, if you start yelling, if you start telling them, and then being able to teach them from the beginning of what to do. You don't want to just say, oh, here's the papers, just do whatever. You know, teaching them and being patient with them. And the first thing is to pick the right person. You know, when we hire someone, we do a lot of interviews. We do first interviews, second interviews, and then make sure that this is the job that they want. You don't want to just have someone, oh, I'm just looking for a job, I just want to be here. You want to make sure that they're excited to be there. They have that enthusiasm to work for you. It's not like, oh, I have to go to work every day. Oh, you want it because it's their home, because they spend more time in our office than they do at home. You know, and if they're not happy there, then it'll make their life miserable, which in turn will make your life miserable. So you have to make sure you pick the right people to surround you with, and then teach them what you want and what you expect, and then be patient with them and continue to teach, not just the first week or so. You know, things come up continuously. I've had my nurses for years, and they teach me and I teach them. You know, they say, oh, I heard about this, or I heard about that, or then I see something's wrong, or one of the students comes and says, you know, our office that I just rotated to did something like this. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Let's try it. So then continuously you teach and bring up new stuff. So being a good leader is to have patience and to teach continuously, I think.
Thank you all for tuning into our virtual Women in STEM panel, and I want to thank all our speakers for taking their time to be with us.
We would also like to thank KBEV producers for recording, editing, and producing our event, and for being so helpful throughout this process. In addition, we would like to thank our teachers, Mr. Castle and Mr. Odorisio, for their guidance and help, and Ms. Dubin for all her support of the robotics team.
And we hope to see you all next time at our Women in STEM event. Thank you for watching.